Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. I hope you're all having a wonderful evening. Thank you for being here for our Wave Makers webinar series. This is very exciting that we have our three panelists, our three filmmakers, Helena, Sienna, and Fiona with us tonight. My name is Katie Baird-Nalvin. I'm the program manager for the Cape Perpetua Collaborative. And the way this webinar will work out, I'm going to just take a few moments and introduce you all to our collaborative. And then I have a couple of questions for the panelists, and then we'll watch Kelp Me Please, the documentary that they created. And then we'll open it up at the end to questions from you all for our panelists. So, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A at any time, and we will definitely make time to answer them. And thank you all for being here tonight. I'll get my screen share up and going. So once again, welcome. As I said before, my name is Katie Baird-Nalvin, and I'm the program manager for the Cape Perpetua Collaborative. The Cape Perpetua Collaborative, what we do is we foster communications, outreach, and awareness and support of the Cape Perpetua Marine Reserve and the adjacent National Forest, the Siuslaw National Forest. So you can find us working anywhere from Yachats, Oregon, all the way down south near to Florence, Oregon. For those of you that don't know, Oregon has 5 marine reserves, and the Cape Perpetua Marine Reserve is the largest. So it really kind of starts right up there in Yachats and then extends south for quite a ways. And then adjacent to the Marine Reserve, we also have 2 MPAs, which are marine protected areas. So they provide less protection than the fully protected Marine Reserve, which allows no take of any kind, but they are still important conservation measures, as well as a seabird protection area. Our collaborative was founded in 2017, and our vision is to foster conservation and collaboration within the local communities for scientific exchange, management, awareness, and stewardship from the land to the sea in and around the Cape Perpetua Marine Reserve. So in 2017, all these groups that you see at the bottom of your screen, Surfrider Foundation, Portland Audubon, the Confederated Tribes of the Kuzlor, Umpqua, and Siuslaw, the Forest Service, the Nature Conservancy, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Oregon State Parks, and Discover Your Northwest, our fiscal sponsor, all came together and said, we're all doing this work in this area. We should work together and collaborate and find better ways to work together for the benefit of conservation in the local communities. We have many, many different programs that we do. So you'll see us out in the field doing tide pool tours that are free and led by experts. If that's something you're interested in, you can follow our website. As soon as we post registration for those events, they tend to fill up. They're very, very fun. And we also do monthly marine debris cleanups and surveys, which is a great citizen science project that we do at Cove Beach in the Marine Reserve. We do bio blitzes, and we also do ambassador programs where our volunteers are out in the community talking about the Marine Reserve, the wildlife that you can find in the Marine Reserve, trails in the forest, anything. You can ask them anything you can imagine. They'll probably know an answer. They come from all different walks of life and have an amazing experience and stories to tell about the area. And they're out supporting awareness of the reserve and beach etiquette and safety and stewardship of the area. We also, another citizen science project that we do is to help monitor sea star wasting. So you'll see us out in the summertime measuring sea stars and counting them and looking for ones that have any signs or symptoms of the sea star wasting disease. So those are all programs that we're able to do under our umbrella of the Cape Perpetua Collaborative. Let me go back one more there. Oh, whoops. Sorry about that. If you're interested in supporting the Cape Perpetua Collaborative, we are fiscally sponsored by a 501c3. So of course we love donations. That's always an excellent way to support us, but we also sell these really fun merchandise that people really love. I'm wearing one right now. Our favorite is the I Like Big Boffs, which is a big old fat female fecund fish. And that is what marine reserves can help promote. So you can, if you're interested in any of this, you can visit our store on bonfire.com and look for the Cape Perpetua Collaborative. They make great gifts too. But really, we invite you all to connect with us on our website, on Facebook. We're also just now on Instagram as of this week at the Cape Perpetua Collaborative. Feel free to email me anytime at capeperpetuacollaborative@gmail.com. We're always interested in finding ways to help get you involved in anything going on in the Cape Perpetua area. We host events, we host webinars such as this one that is, intended to promote our young wave makers in the community. And if you're interested in volunteering, please reach out as well. So sorry about this, I didn't update this slide, but tonight on December 13th, we're having the Kelp Me Please documentary screening. And then coming up in January 10th, we are continuing our webinar series with a talk from Zach Mueller, who's a PhD student, to talk about sea star wasting disease here in Oregon. And then in March, we have another wave maker webinar about harmful algal blooms in Oregon. So that brings us to tonight, our Kelp Me Please team. Kelp Me Please is a short film made by the students at an OMSI summer camp in collaboration with Northwest Documentary. The students worked together to create 4 short films centered around sea otters and the Oregon coast. One of these films is called Kelp Me Please, and with the help of specialists, it provides insight into the importance of kelp and the threats it faces. So I'm very pleased that we have our filmmakers here with us tonight. And before we watch our webinar, I'd love to turn it over to our panelists just to ask a few questions before, help build in excitement and anticipation for the final product here. So real quick, could our panelists just go around and introduce themselves, maybe tell us what grade you're in and where you're calling in from? And anything else you'd like to share?
I'm Fiona. I'm 14. I'm in freshman in high school. I'm in Portland, Northeast Portland, Oregon.
Hi, my name is Helena Miller. I am a sophomore at South Salem High School in Salem.
Yeah, and I'm Sienna Cooper. I am a freshman in high school at Catlin Gable School in Portland, Oregon.
Thanks. So one question I have for you all is, did any of you have any filmmaking experience before making this Kelp Me Please documentary?
I had taken a photography and videography class, so that was pretty much it, like a tiny bit of photography.
This is sort of generally what my dad does for a living, so I've helped him out through the years a little bit, but this is the first time doing something just like this, a short film start to finish. Definitely my first time using any video editing software.
Yeah, this is my first time doing something quite like this. I had taken a photography class through my school, but that was as extensive as it had gotten.
Yeah, so it's kind of a new endeavor for all of you, more or less. So keep that in mind when we watch it. I think you'll all be pretty blown away. So I'd like to ask if you could briefly explain how you landed on this topic, why you decided to make a documentary about kelp.
Yeah, our summer camp through OMSI and Northwest Documentary, we had a general topic of sea otters, and we are 3 of 11 campers. So we split up into groups and had different topics. Our group was the kelp group, There was also a group that focused on the Oregon Coast Aquarium and the rehabilitation efforts for bringing sea otters and back to the Oregon coast, but also taking care of any washed ashore animals. There was a group focused on the Alaka Alliance, and who are also interested in the reintroduction efforts. And there's our group, the Kelp group, and then we had a behind the scenes video, which is the 4th video that we produced.
Yeah, great. So I have some more questions for you, but I think I'll save them till after we watch the film. But one last question is, how much work goes into making a 6-minute documentary?
More than
About 2 weeks of work. It was a week, a weekend, and another week. The wrap was on Wednesday of the second week. So 9 days. I don't know if I did that math right. About 9 days.
Yeah, we started with a couple days of kind of learning how to use all of the cameras and tripods and that sort of thing. And then immediately sort of went into filming and editing just right away. So pretty solid portion of maybe around 9 days.
Yeah.
And I would imagine these are like full days, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we were working till like 8:30, 9:30.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, excellent. I'm so excited to share Kelp Me Please on this webinar, kind of debut it in a way. I had the privilege of helping. I was interviewed for this film. That's how I knew about it. And I have to say, I was really, really impressed with the whole setup and everything that you had going on. And I was so excited when I saw the final project. So without further ado, I will start the film.
Kelp, the trees of the sea, are a key part of our ocean ecosystems. But what is kelp?
So kelp is a brown algae. It likes to grow in places where there's lots of nutrients along the coast, like here in Oregon. It grows really fast. It can grow inches in a day. It's one of the fastest growing species of algae. It's also really important for coastal habitats and ecosystems. There's many species that live within kelp forests, rockfish, other species of algae, and all sorts of invertebrates like sea stars and sunflower sea stars.
Within this ecosystem, kelp, otters, and purple sea urchins maintain a unique balance.
Sea otters, unlike many other marine mammals that have blubber, sea otters instead have fur. And one of the other ways that they keep warm is by eating a lot. They have incredibly high metabolisms, and they need to eat about 25% of their body mass daily. And one of their favorite things is sea urchins. So having your sea otters, that apex predator, the top of the food chain in this ecosystem, helps create balance for the overall ecosystem.
But now, the ecosystem is in a state of disarray.
The Oregon coast actually has no sea otters, and that's because sea otters were hunted right to the brink of extinction all along the Pacific Rim. So the historical range of sea otters actually extends all the way from areas of Japan all the way down to areas of Baja California in Mexico.
That has been a loss for the ecosystem here because sea otters are what we call a keystone species. They eat lots of sea urchins, and sea urchins eat kelp. So without the sea otters here, urchins have been able to explode in population, and that has decimated the kelp forests on the Oregon coast, because without sea otters keeping the urchins in check, kelp forests turn into what are called urchin barrens.
Unfortunately, the negative effects on kelp forests because of sea otters' absence were dramatically furthered in 2014 by sea star wasting disease.
We're seeing less kelp, but a lot more sea urchins. And part of that has to do with not having the sea otters around. But the other part of that too is we had the sea star wasting disease, which when it wiped out the sea stars, the sea urchin population boomed because that was the other predator that was eating the sea urchins.
Some sea stars have been making a comeback but have yet to recover fully. However, the sunflower sea star, a species of sea star that preys predominantly on the purple sea urchin, has not yet made the same recovery, helping to let urchin populations boom. But the efforts of a few conservation programs might just turn the tide.
10 years ago, the state of Oregon recognized a need to protect and conserve the ocean, and the Marine Reserves Program was then born. The goal of marine reserves is to set aside a specific area of the ocean for conservation and scientific study. Marine reserves, there is absolutely no fishing allowed or any type of ocean development. And this really creates an area in the ocean that can be thought of as a living laboratory to study and watch and observe changing ocean conditions over time.
Within marine reserves, aquatic ecosystems have flourished, but climate change still threatens oceanic life.
Last year when I did tide pooling, we had a day where it was 90 degrees out and we were tide pooling, and the next day just the amount of mussels that were dead and seaweed that was bleached is a concern. So as the temperatures are rising, the concern is these tide pool creatures are not going to be able to adapt.
Added kelp growth would lessen the excessive amount of carbon stored in the ocean, which in turn would help bring balance to not only the ocean, but the entire planet. If we help kelp, kelp helps us.
There's a saying that every breath you take, you can think a whale. And the idea behind that is trees and grass help promote the air we breathe. So does the ocean. And there's a lot more ocean than there is land. So really, we should all be very thankful and feel connected to the sea for all that it brings for us. As the human population has grown throughout our history, we've really depended on the sea for so many of our resources. Setting aside areas of the ocean, specifically for conservation, gives the ocean a chance to rebuild its balance, which in turn helps support life for us all.
Yay! That was awesome. Every time I watch it, I'm just blown away by how great it is. So congratulations, you all. I know that a tremendous amount of work went into all of that, and you have a fantastic final product. So participants, please use the Q&A box or the chat, and we can answer some questions from you all as well. But I have some questions too as we wait for some other folks to bring it in. So how about an easy one first? Could each of you explain like your specific role in creating Kelp Me Please?
So I didn't do a lot of the assembly editing just because I found it very challenging, but like Helena and Sienna both really loved it. So I did a lot of the like graphics and quite a bit of the filming. I think we all split the filming pretty evenly together. We did it pretty good. And we also researched a lot for the film. So we all also split some of that.
Yeah, I would say I was pretty involved with the editing, especially some of the like picking out some of the B-roll. I did the voiceover for the film. I think Helena, you worked more on sort of the music and a lot of the footage assembly, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, no, that's right. The fun thing about this collaboration is we all got to try every portion of it, and we liked some parts of it more than we liked others. Like I would really liked editing, but I also really liked shooting the film itself. And that was fun, especially when we were just out at the tide pools, because some of our shots are from the tide pools out at Cape Perpetua. And that was really cool because someone would see something and be like, "Hey, can I have the camera?" And we'd be like, "Yeah, what do you want to take a video of?" And so it'd be really cool to see what shots different people come up with, because we don't look at the things the same way. So that collaboration was really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Isn't it interesting how one person can, two people can look at the same thing and have totally different perspectives and capture that on film? That's super interesting. So we do have some questions coming in from our audience. So I'll just read them off as they come in. This one is, what was the most interesting thing that you learned while making the film?
I don't remember where it was from, but so I think it was in the 1970s, there was an island that was needed to be like cleared out for some reason, and there was a large amount of sea otters. I think the island was part of a military usage situation, and they just tried, and they're like, we have a whole bunch of sea otters. The Oregon coast didn't have any sea otters, so they all just kind of dumped them along the west coast, and within like 20 years, all of them just didn't stay. So I found that really interesting, that there's just something about Oregon, because they did stay in parts of Washington and California, but still nothing where we were. So I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah, I concur. The fact that sea otters just have not stayed through those attempts to try and reintroduce them to the Oregon coast is really interesting. I think also I learned a lot about sort of everything that needs kelp forests and why they're so needed, that I just didn't really know before. Like so many animals and just, I guess, not as much plants, but lots and lots of animals rely on kelp forests to just, function and live. And it was interesting to sort of learn about how they all intersect.
Yeah, we learned all of this in like a very short amount of time, because we went from learning what we had to, that we were making a documentary about sea otters, or like as a general topic, and kelp as our primary focus. And we learned a lot. We ended up going to the Gwynn Library, which is a part of Hatfield Marine Science Center, the OSU extension out in Newport. And the librarian was very kind and had pulled books for us and printed out a thesis paper. So I ended up reading an ecological assessment of potential sea otter reintroduction along the Oregon coast, which is probably way above my reading level. But it was really fun to see this information and developing our ideas. So we learned about the Aleutian Islands and how sea otters got moved away from the Aleutian Islands when they were used for bomb testing. We also learned about reintroduction efforts and what it takes to have a sustainable kelp forest. And so that was really, really cool. But we also learned what it's like to make a documentary. We learned what kind of shots go next to each other. We also learned, how do you make a camera tilt in a way that's pleasing to the audience? So it was really big learning experience.
Yeah, there was a lot to learn in filming too, so much. And filming interviews, there was so much that went into learning how to do that, and writing up the questions, all of that.
Definitely. So we have a couple more questions. I'm going to combine two of these here. So one is, what is the most surprising thing that you learned about kelp? And then the other one to go along with it is, how did you learn so much about kelp in the ecosystem in such a short time? And then also make a documentary about it.
Yeah. So I think the most surprising thing I learned about kelp, this is gonna sound a little shallow, I guess, but I didn't realize there were so many kinds of kelp. Like, I always thought of it as like, oh, it's kelp, it's like plants in the sea. No, there are so many different types of kelp, and there's one type that grows a lot along the Oregon coast, and there's another type that grows more along the California coast. And it was just interesting for me to sort of hear about all of that. And then on learning so much about the kelp ecosystem over in such a short time, I would say that was mostly just having it be your entire life for 2 weeks, just to learn about kelp and then make a film. Like that's it. That's all we did.
I think that, again, it being our lives for 2 weeks, but also, again, the Gwyn Library books and things helped a lot. We went to the aquarium, they taught us some stuff. And also we had the interviews because we needed to film them relatively early on. I think a lot of the interviews taught us even more about kelp, because we were all talking to people who worked at the marine reserves or marine biologists and people like that. So they knew a lot more than us about kelp, at least. So interviewing them helped a lot with like learning.
Yeah, definitely the combination of written resources and talking with people in our interviews was how we learned a lot. And we kind of, given such a short time frame, we kind of worked with what we had. So we got an interview with Katie. Katie was our first interview, and we got so much insight, and we chose to change how we had originally structured our film, so it would be better suited to what information we had now. And so that was something that was really cool, because we learned and we changed the film as we went, given the materials we had, which I thought was super cool. We learned so much about kelp. Like, there's so many varieties. Kelp isn't one of the most interesting things I thought was we got to go to the Oregon Coast Aquarium, and we got to shoot behind the scenes, and we were talking with the people there, and very little of the kelp that they have there is real because it's so hard to maintain in a closed ecosystem. So that's really interesting. That's not something I'd noticed when I'd gone to the aquarium before. But we had also learned that bull kelp is primarily what lives along the Oregon coast, and that kelp helps in storm surges and helps reduce how damaging the ocean can be during storms. So that was really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't know that about the kelp at the aquarium, actually, and I worked there for years and I didn't know that. So that's a good little tidbit there. But yeah, I agree. It's so interesting, all of what we're learning about the ocean that creates a natural resilience to a lot of the problems that we're facing as people due to the climate crisis and things like that. So I'm glad you brought that up, that kelp is one more beneficial thing about kelp. So back to some filmmaking questions, moving away from kelp for a moment. You talked about how, throughout the filmmaking process, you had to adapt and change your plan based on what you had to work with. And so I'm curious, when you said that interviewing people was like a whole new skill set you had to learn, I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit. And then also a question from the audience is, an audience member is wondering how did you learn to build in the graphics that are in the documentary, and what did you use to do that?
With the interview question, Interviewing is a whole thing. You, Katie, remember we had like the person with the boom mic and had to all set up all the clip mics, and we had 2 or 3 cameras going at once because one of them could fall out at any moment. That was something that happened. But yeah, it's an entirely different thing from just walking around tide pools with a video camera taking 10-second clips of random sea anemones, from actually learning how to frame a person in the screen and ask good interview questions. It's new and was pretty hard at first.
Yeah, I agree. It's getting used to, we had to learn how to do indoor interviews that we didn't actually do any. And it's just, there's so much lighting that you have to, figure out, and where you want your, different sound recordings to be, all of that, as Fiona talked about. And then I didn't make the graphics, but Fiona, like, how did you make those?
I used Canva, which is just a free online tool to make the graphics. And then the Northwest documentary person helped me a lot, like putting them in and knowing that I needed space around the borders and all that kind of thing. But I had Canva before and I knew generally how to use it. So I just sort of built the graphics around that, and it turned out pretty good.
Awesome. So we've had the same question come up twice by 2 different participants. So I'm excited to hear your answer. If you could make another documentary, what would your dream subject be?
That's really hard. I'm really into robotics at my school. So there was a recent documentary by Disney about the robotics program that I participate in, but I would make a follow-up. I would make a follow-up film to that, I think. Or maybe one about like local wildlife of some sort, maybe birds.
I think doing another marine biology film would be super great. I really love that. Or like, I've always had like a weird vision of like the nature documentaries that you watch, but it's not calming or soothing. It's like all the fast action chases and all the weird going into holes and eating stuff kind of ones. And it's more of an action nature documentary instead of a soothing nature documentary. I think that would be pretty fun.
I like it.
I think that would be so fun if you had an action nature documentary. That sounds like a brilliant idea. I would be happy to work with you on that if you need a partner. But I generally really like the idea of doing a nature documentary or something environmental, because there's such a beauty in nature, and being able to show that to someone else through a film is really a unique opportunity and could be really valued.
Definitely. Well, Kelp Me Please is definitely really valued here. So we definitely relate to that. And, if you want to come back to Cape Perpetua and make one about birds, we'll sign you up. Another question about the filmmaking process. Did anything go wrong along the way, and how did you overcome it?
Well, yeah. Sorry, Fiona, go ahead.
Okay. I was just the first thing that went wrong at the beginning, everyone else had like interviews lined up, and because we had more of a broad topic, we had nothing. For the first couple days, we were like throwing around ideas that maybe we would have to voice over the entire thing, or possibly there was at one point we had the idea of doing like a funny animated style documentary with fake kelp and things. We ended up getting some interviews, and actually we had to, through going along, we had 4, which is more than everyone else, so we ended up having to cut one of them, which that was a hard decision to make, but yeah.
Yeah, the interviews, in my opinion, were probably our biggest hurdle because, like Fiona said, going into the week, we didn't have a single interview lined up. But when we went to the aquarium for the aquarium team, there was a marine reserve tabling event fair, and we got to talking with the Cape Perpetua team and the Otter Rock team. So we got interviews with Katie and Roy, and those were really cool. And that was how we overcame getting those interviews, and the other two kind of trickled in on their own. And that was really cool to see something that felt like such a big, ominous task. Like, how are we possibly going to figure out what we're going to say? And yeah, this is actually happening. It was such a big jump, but also it was totally doable. We found a way to get it done, and we have a documentary. So that was really cool.
Yeah. I think some smaller hurdles, aside from obviously the interviews, which is very scary going in, but some smaller hurdles is filming in an aquarium is hard. Water reflects, and there was so much glare. It's just hard to film fish tanks. There's weird angles. It was hard to set up shots. So trying to get any footage there was really difficult, but I think what we did get sort of turned out in the end. And then when we were editing, we found that a big portion of your interview, Katie, was like a couple shades too bright. So we had to mess around with it until it looked on color, and did some funny cuts between the two cameras.
Yeah. Aquarium had so much glass. Another thing that we were dealing with is we could only work, the three of us, during the editing process on one computer at a time, because not only did we not have any other computers, we had to use the Adobe Premiere on only one computer, because I don't think you can share it between accounts. So that was challenging because only one of us could actually like work on it at a time. Someone else, we had a second pair of headphones and a headphone separator, so two of us could have headphones on and be like messing with the audio and giving feedback, but one of us always had to sit there doing nothing.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a lot of work, and it's, you know, being the user, just seeing the final product, you would never know that you had to make so many like last minute decisions and be really adaptive, because it all just came together so well. So another question about the filmmaking process: how did you work together to edit the script, and did you have to make the film a specific time limit?
So we didn't really write too much of a script, I guess. We wrote the voiceover, and just there wasn't too much, so we just kind of worked together on it and making the voiceover for specific sections based on what we needed to say to transition. And then for the time limit, it was not like a specific sort of set time, just within like maybe 5 to 7 or 8 minutes. So around there.
Mhm.
Oh, great. So one more question from our audience, and then I have a question to finish us up here. So this was so well done. It all felt very professional. How did you come up with the name Kelp Me Please?
So
Here, can I take that one?
yeah,
What?
absolutely.
Okay, so that's actually kind of a funny story, because when we were first told we were going to do a film, we were going to do 4 films on Sea Otters. We hadn't been assigned groups yet, and they announced the different groups. So the Alaka Alliance, the Oregon Coast Aquarium, and the Kelp Group. And we were kind of joking around and jokingly said, "Kelp me, please." And the name kind of stuck for a while. And then right up
The name was
right up till the wrap, we were trying to come up with a more professional name or like something that was more presentable or more formal.
we had one, we had to make like a list of names to submit to the camp director, just to kind of narrow them down, I guess. And Kelp Me Please was not the name she picked. She picked one of the joke names. She picked one of the long, very formal, detailed names that we were not planning on using. But we ended up
Help of the Oregon Coast ecosystem in crisis.
yes. So we ended up kind of vetoing that a little bit and just went with Kelp Me Please because it's clearly a much better name.
It is a great name. Love the name. Whenever I talk about it, people always smile when they hear the name Kelp Me Please. So well done on that one. So my final question that I'd like to ask you all to close out our discussion, and again, thank you so much for being here, is what do you hope the viewer will learn from your film?
That, like, I don't think people think about kelp unless you know about it. Like, again, Sienna, I think it was, who said that before this, she just thought kelp was plants in the sea, and it's so much more than that, and it helps so that keeps together our ocean ecosystems in such a unique way. The climate change part of it also, it absorbs so much carbon dioxide from the ocean, and there's so much of it around the globe that I hope people will get out of it that kelp is more than just sea plants, and that it's really important to everyone's daily life.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's important too, specifically for, I guess, people living in Oregon, that it's such an integral part of our ecosystem and of our coast as a whole. And it's so important to everything on the coast, especially otters and of course sea urchins.
Yeah. For me, when you see this film, I want you to take away how important kelp is. Usually it goes unnoticed. Like, you don't walk out to the coast and look out at the ocean and say, ah, yes, kelp. That's usually not people's reaction. But
I do now.
right. But there's so much that the ocean does for us. There's so much that kelp does for us. And when you start thinking about your impact on the environment, it's important to think that it's not just what you see on land, but it's also what you see in the water, and that your impact makes a difference. So to start thinking of it as a bigger picture and what you can do for the environment is really a takeaway I want you to be able to see.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, all three of you, so much for being here and chatting with us tonight and leaving us with those words of Kelp Me Please and being so thankful for all the kelp that we have. So thank you, everybody. We will get this posted on our website here soon by the end of the week. And, we hope you all enjoyed our discussion tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.